Hey guys, welcome to the Liberal Hive Mind, a channel solely focused on exposing the abundant hypocrisy of the left. So now they want a truce. Isn't that interesting? The typical repeated Democrat modus operandi. Act like a crazy person, use the most extreme tactics and extreme rhetoric, or essentially enable the most extreme actions, refuse to do the right ethical thing unless you absolutely have to. We saw it during the BLM riots, right? Over 100 days of burning cities, $2 billion in damages, and the Democrats didn't condemn the violence until more than 100 days after the riots had commenced. They only came out publicly once the focus groups started to shift. Well, now it's the exact same thing. Years and years of sowing discord and pushing the most divisive, out-of-control rhetoric, nearly a decade of pitting Americans against each other as if your neighbor, the Trump supporter, is somehow a domestic extremist threat and your enemy. Actions and rhetoric that were wrong since day one, yet they kept doing it and kept doubling down, but now all of a sudden they've seen the light, and it's time to heal. Of course, only after they suffered the most devastating loss, essentially in the past 2 decades. Only now do they finally admit the truth. Yep, the Democrats only pretend to do the right thing or to frankly act like normal human beings when their back's against the wall and they're left with absolutely no choice. And even then, they're totally disingenuous in their attempt to do so. You probably know exactly where I'm going with this or what we're talking about here. We got a clip from Morning Joe and Mika Brzezinski that's currently making the rounds and bouncing all over social media. They now want a truce with Donald Trump and to bring the heat down. We gotta talk about this. We got some stuff to get into, so let's roll the tape. All right, so let's talk about this ridiculous clip currently making the rounds where Mika Brzezinski and Morning Joe, or Joe Scarborough of MSNBC, suddenly claim that it's time to turn down the heat and work with Trump. They even met with Donald Trump. Just take a look at this.
Over the past week, Joe and I have heard from so many people, from political leaders to regular citizens, deeply dismayed by several of President-elect Trump's cabinet selections, and they are scared. Last Thursday, we expressed our own concerns on this broadcast and even said we would appreciate the opportunity to speak with the president-elect himself. On Friday, we were given the opportunity to do just that. Joe and I went to Mar-a-Lago to meet personally with President-elect Trump. It was the first time we have seen him in 7 years.
Now, we talked about a lot of issues, including abortion, mass deportation, threats of political retribution against political opponents, and media outlets. We talked about that a good bit. And it's going to come as no surprise to anybody who watches this show, has watched it over the past year or over the past decade, that we didn't see eye to eye on a lot of issues, and we told him so.
What we did agree on was to restart communications. My father often spoke with world leaders with whom he and the United States profoundly disagreed. That's a task shared by reporters and commentators alike. We had not spoken to President Trump since March of 2020, other than a personal call Joe made to Trump on the morning after the attempt on his life in Butler, Pennsylvania. In this meeting, President Trump was cheerful, he was upbeat, he seemed interested in finding common ground with Democrats on some of the most divisive issues. And for those asking why we would go speak to the president-elect during such fraught times, especially between us, I guess I would ask back, why wouldn't we? 5 years of political warfare has deeply divided Washington and the country. We have been as clear as we know how in expressing our deep concerns about President Trump's actions and words in the coarsening of public debate. But for nearly 80 million Americans, election denialism, public trials, and January 6th were not as important as the issues that moved them to send Donald Trump back to the White House with their vote. Joe and I realize it's time to do something different, and that starts with not only talking about Donald Trump, but also talking with him.
It's one of those Kumbaya moments, isn't it? Oh, we're all gonna come together and finally love each other again. Give me a break. I mean, it's almost as if they've woken up in a parallel universe and decided to pretend as if they haven't been the source of some of this most divisive, vitriolic rhetoric that we've seen in the media for the past 8 years. I mean, holy moly. This is a pathetic, desperate attempt to save face. That's all it is, because they know their ratings are cratering. And I know some people are giving them praise, but isn't it obvious? This isn't some genuine plea for unity. No, it's an insincere, half-hearted attempt to pivot because they've seen the writing on the wall for their failing network. And you can tell how disingenuous it is by listening to the words carefully. They're essentially saying that, hey, maybe we need to come together now. Sure, we've been calling Donald Trump basically Hitler for the better part of a decade, but it didn't work. You guys didn't agree with us. Even though we totally think that we're right and he's an existential threat to democracy, but you're obviously not smart enough to get that, and so maybe it's time that we all come together, huh? We have to accept Donald Trump because he's now the president of the United States. How incredibly insincere. I feel almost as if this is an insult more than an apology. What it should be is an actual apology, but instead it's, oh, he's an insurrectionist and a threat to democracy, but you guys didn't see it that way, so now we have to suck it up and play nice. What an insincere slap in the face that is. We accept him now not because we've changed our minds, but because we have to. That's what they're saying. The country's moving on and we need to stay relevant. They're not extending an olive branch, friends. They're waving the white flag because they're out of moves. I say moves, that's a little bit interesting. That implies that they have some sort of deep arsenal with all kinds of different tools and tactics, but they've only ever had one tactic this entire time. Oh my God, he's literally Hitler.
When is the time to sound the alarm? When is the time to start saying, well, does this look like Germany in 1932?
This is not a reach. I could go back and talk about Nazi Germany, and I do it without any concerns whatsoever. And if people can't start drawing the parallels, well, you're just stupid, or you have your head in the sand, or you're one of them.
We still have an electorate, 70 million plus, that will be voting for a man who said he was going to assassinate for treason the chairman of the Joint Chiefs because he didn't support him on January the 6th, who has said just in recent days he was going to execute Liz Cheney with a firing squad, 9 guns pointed and shooting at her face. A man who has said that he was going to shut down CBS because he didn't like how they edited an interview. A man who said he was going to be a dictator from day one.
I mean, just think about how truly absurd this is. Mika and Joe have been at the forefront of labeling Donald Trump a dictator, a tyrant, someone who's going to destroy America and take all of your rights. And now suddenly they're saying maybe it's time to tone down the divisiveness? Give me a break. These people essentially made their careers feeding their audience an endless stream of Trump derangement syndrome. They were never engaging in journalism. They were almost every day actively stoking division, fear, and outrage at every chance they got. It's all they ever did. And now these two want you to believe that they've seen the light. No, they're just feeling the heat. MSNBC is tanking. We've seen their ratings. The network's going straight to the gutter. The ratings are in what can only be described as a freefall, mostly because the American public is waking up to their endless hysteria and fear-mongering, and now this is the desperate groveling of 2 talking head actors attempting to save face. But I'll tell you one thing, it's an interesting tactic, but I don't think it's gonna work. Let me say it very clearly to all the anchors at MSNBC. You guys have made your bed and now you have to sleep in it. And you've developed your audience, the MSNBC faithful. You've essentially conditioned a group of people to see Donald Trump as the ultimate evil. Ooh, a spooky demon. Donald Trump is essentially El Diablo. And now you expect to turn it all around? Give me a break. The internet's already lighting up with comments from their own viewers calling them sellouts for even entertaining the idea of working with Donald Trump. MSNBC is already facing boycotts from their own audience over this clip. I don't know what they're thinking, but obviously this is what happens when you spend years, nearly a decade, attempting to convince your audience that anyone who disagrees with you is the enemy. You're now the enemy. You're caught in your own trap. They've poisoned the well for so long that any attempt to now pivot reeks of desperation, not just from your detractors, but from your own core audience base. So no, Mika and Joe, we don't buy your sudden unity message. You don't get to play peacemaker after spending nearly a decade of tearing the country apart with your insane inflammatory rhetoric. You're not interested in unity, you're just interested in saying whatever you have to say to make sure the big bucks keep coming in. The damage is done, and no amount of fake olive branches can undo what has been done. I know you desperately want to unburden yourself from what has been, but the unburdening has already happened, and that's America unburdening themselves from the insane leftist rhetoric that you and your cohorts in the media have subjected the people to for far too long. It's over, and I don't think anybody with their head on straight would accept this clearly disingenuous, half-hearted apology where you essentially reconfirm all the biases but then just say, well, it's time to work together because we have no choice. Give me a frickin' break. What an utter insult to the intelligence of every American voter. Anyways, that's pretty much what I got for you guys on this one. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to leave a like and possibly subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.